Hi there YouTube, XtremeTrainz here. Yep, it's here. Thomas Wood has finally arrived in Australia. I picked these Thomas Wood items you see in front of me up from the department store Myer when I was in Melbourne over the weekend. And they are here, they are flooding the shelves. Thomas Wooden Railway is no more, or at least it's definitely not coming off the trucks from the Mattel warehouse. So I picked some of them up. They had a pretty nice 20% off if you buy more than 2 toys sale. So I picked up some of the items. This video I'm going to be focusing on Thomas because I want to do a comparison. As you can see, I've got some different versions of Thomas here, which I think will be useful, but I will be reviewing these in different videos because I know that people don't want to watch videos that go for like, 10 hours, which is probably how long I could talk about these toys, particularly knowing how they've gone down. So we'll do a quick overview of everything, then we'll get into the actual evolution of Thomas video, which is the point of this review. So, if you're ready for some Thomas merchandise drama, strap in, let's see what we get done. Okay, so I want to talk about pricing and the way these engines are sold. So, when I discussed Diesel 10, I said the pricing in Australia hadn't been confirmed. Now, it has been confirmed, and this is at one of the pretty much most expensive places you will buy toys in Australia, but they are one of the main places to get Thomas Wooden Railway, and now Thomas Wood, so I think it's still relevant. So, what you can see here is that, really weirdly, some of the engines are cheaper than the other engines. So, Thomas and Percy, for example, as you can see on these stickers, were $12.95 Australian. It's kind of hard to see. There you go, $12.95 Australian for Thomas and Percy. Now, even though Diesel 10 is the same size and comes in the same packaging, he was $13.95. So I don't know if this is a weird error by Myer, but some of the engines this size were $13.95, some of them were $12.95. I will say that it seemed that the very popular characters like Thomas and Percy were the cheaper ones, and the more obscure ones, for example, like Hugo, were the more expensive ones. So I don't know if there's something going on there. And then the third now price category of these is $22.95, which is how much it costs for the tender engines, which are this big, because now, as with the Trackmaster and the Adventures, they're all the same size, which we'll talk about in other videos. So, quickly on the price then. Previously, engines that were this size, they were all the same, there wasn't a differentiation, were $14.99 Australian or $15 at Myer and also at Toys R Us, which tend to charge the same amount. And these engines were $25 for this larger tender engine sized size class. So there has been a price decrease in the individual engines. I saw some of the big sets. I saw the figure 8 set and like Cranky and stuff, and they were still very expensive. Like I'm talking over, I think nearly $100 for the figure 8 set. So I didn't pick any of them up because they didn't fit in my carry-on bag, but also because they're very expensive, obviously, although I will be picking up some of the sets hopefully later on, hopefully get them on sale and I can talk about them as well. At the meantime, I just want to talk about the engines. So, that's the pricing. We're going to get rid of these guys, save them for another video. Yeah, we are. Whoops. Okay, dropping things everywhere. Let's talk about this. So, I didn't really collect Thomas Wooden Railway, A, because I don't collect most standard Thomas lines, because I just am not that interested. I prefer the weird items, and also because, we don't have unlimited money, and I would prefer to collect stuff like Transformers, which, as you can see, there's quite a lot of, than Thomas and Friends for the most part, even though I quite enjoy the show. But Thomas Wood has really sparked my eye because I think it's quite interesting, as I kind of talked about in my Diesel 10 video. So, when I heard it was coming, I picked up a Thomas here, which again, cost me a little bit less than $15 because I got him on sale. But this was the final version of Thomas from Thomas Wooden Railway that we saw. I'm going to point out some really interesting changes that have carried on from one to the other. This is what the packaging looks like. I'm not going to go into it in super detail, because I just want to show it to you. That's what that looks like. This is what the Thomas Wood packaging looks like. Obviously, this is a super gross sticker. They should have put that somewhere else. But anyway, you can see very, very different stickering, and I think, and packaging rather, and I think it really does it says a lot about what they've done with this new rebrand of Thomas. I think it's really interesting to read the description to say, Thomas has been reimagined and brought to life with warm wood tones, which is just code for no paint, but that's okay. Alright, so that's what the packaging looks like. let's rip these guys open, and then we can talk about them with that bad boy. Alright, so let's look at this little Thomas here. So, I'm just going to do the 360 for the camera before we get into it. Okay, so the first thing to note about this Thomas is he has different detailing. So he's got no more dome, that's gone goodbye. There's a weird circle there though to show you there was one there. And instead we've got this here, which is a cutout for this little wheel cover, which is different. We've got the face, which is again, it's slightly smaller than the black part, which is a change that we actually saw carried over from here. Again, I'm going to talk about it in a second. We've got buffer beams now, come around the side, we've got the running board again there. Nothing on the back. Wood part underneath behind the wheels. And you've got the Thomas written on the bottom. So that's what he looks like. In terms of how it looks, again, I actually don't hate this aesthetic. I think the exposed wood, particularly from the side, from this angle, looks really nice. I really like the way that looks. I think even from the top, it looks okay. I think this, to me, is really unflattering, though. Like, that does not look very good versus that one. It just looks... This looks really plain. If they printed up here, for example, and this wasn't so square, I think this would look better. But I think this, to me, is a very, very bad angle for these toys. And I really think looking in front on is not good. Equally, looking in from the back, you just see the straight wood, which is a little bit unfortunate. There's a weird finish on these, as I said, because I think they're printed in the same way the Thomas Minis and stuff are. Like, it's like printed on with like a sticker or something. Not a sticker, but you know, it's printed on with heat rather than the paint that was on the original. Yeah, so you can see that's how this guy looks like that. Let's compare him to the most recent Thomas. Smaller face. So this was obviously testing this design here in the same way we saw Thomas Adventures was, or the new take and play with the magnets was the test for Thomas Adventures. You can see that that component of him is like very nearly the same size. Like his face is very nearly the same. He's got little dots in his eyes now too, which I actually really like. I don't know if other people like them, but I actually really like them. Again, we can see this one had this part all sealed in. This was obviously all painted, although this one you can't quite see it in this video. It's a bit hard because there's so much reflection from my lighting. But there is actually some paint that seems to have like scratched off or been very thinly applied. There you go, you can see it there, that blue paint coming through. So this top part was not painted properly, so I don't know what's going on there. Painted on the back, black underneath, you know, Thomas blah 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 words there. Another interesting thing that's the same is the indented magnets. So again, if you go back real olden days, the magnets used to stick out. Now they are indented on both Thomas Wood and on Thomas Wooden Railway, and I think from looking at this, the magnets are exactly the same part. Okay then, so let's do a bit more of a hard up comparison. If we put these engines, you can see that the Thomas Wood is shorter than Thomas, the original one. So he has Thomas, even this Thomas has gotten shorter than this one in terms of height. I'm going to have to come down level. I'm going to have to just take off the tripod. I would cut this, but I think it's far more fun if it's live. You can see the height is nearly the same. We'll come from behind, get that lovely side view of the differences. Yeah, I think the new one is maybe slightly shorter. The coal bunker is a bit further down, but I actually think it's slightly shorter. Again, you can see that when they put them up side by side, you can just get an idea of just how different these things are. And I think you can start to appreciate the lack of length, for example, which is on these toys. And then again, I think this front up is really where you see that comparison. And they do look like very separate toys, very separate toy lines. The other thing is that the plastic used on this smoke box is way more shiny than the plastic here. This was like a matte plastic. This is like a very shiny plastic that they've used, which I think has been interesting. Lastly, quickly to note in differences, I was talking about the roof missing paint. This roof has got some already dinted parts, as you can kind of see with that reflection. There's already some dinted bits on, there you go, you can see it now there. So someone's taken a bite out of the roof of this Thomas, apparently. So yep, there we go. That's the comparison of these two. What about this guy? So if you've been watching my channel for a while, I actually did do a review of all the Thomas Wooden Railway stuff that I had, which is quite some years ago now, but the collection hasn't expanded since that video. So if you go to my old channel, Trainz Extreme, You can just, it's also, there's a link on my channel to it and stuff. I did do a collection video of that, so if you want to know more about that, go to that video. But I've obviously pulled the Thomas from here, which I've got, and this is the Thomas from when I was a child. So it's from about 1998. The wheels say 97. So it could be that old. I don't know if I was given Thomas when I was 1 or 2, but yeah. This is a nearly 21-year-old Thomas, and you can see just how much has changed when you compare it to this. I think everyone would say that this version is an upgrade from this one, and I think you would be silly to not say this is an upgrade. It is far more realistic, the paint is much better, he's bigger, the face is better, there's more details on there. You know, this Thomas is the superior Thomas to this one, I think, by quite some way, and I think this would definitely be seen as a step forward. Fast forward now to 21 years later, and when you do this kind of comparison, I think it's a bit more interesting. To me, this is still the upgraded toy. Whoop, let's stick it together. Because even though this has got, you know, more paint, it's got far fewer details than this one. Again, I just think the face is really important, and I really like these new CGI faces, even though this is like a classic Thomas face. Mine was a bit crooked, as you can see. It was like never quite straight. Just even stuff like the funnel, although this one has a dome, this one doesn't. You know, I think the competition is a lot closer, but I still think this is a better toy than this one. It's just a very different aesthetic than what we are used to. So yeah, let me know your thoughts on this one versus this one. What would you rather have, the Thomas Wooden Round or the Thomas Wood? Obviously, if you get this brand new, that's probably the more legitimate comparison. I think a lot of people are going to say this, but is that because it's actually a better toy? Or is it because we hate Thomas Wood? Think about it. Alright, so at the end of this, what are my thoughts? I still maintain that the Thomas Wood as a toy is not that bad. I think there are things about it which are good. For example, the fact that we now have paint on the front buffer beams. The fact that we have these kind of cutouts for the details, which do change engine to engine, and I'll show that in the later review videos. I think it's good that, you know, we're getting them in a new way. I like the wood aesthetic. I think it's quite nice from some angles, but not all angles. So I think as a toy, it's not too bad. When you compare it though to this, I think it is very easy to say, as I said in my Diesel 10 video, that this seems like a downgrade, because this was really beautifully painted. There's a lot of effort gone into it. It's a nice size. It has all the important details, and again, right, like you could add buffer details to this. There's no reason why you had to do this to add the buffer details. I mean, heck, you could have printed on these details onto the paint. Or even new design to make it smaller, but just paint the whole thing. Just because I think that, for example, the head-on is really bad. Diesel 10 was okay, but on Thomas, this looks really bad. And I think, you know, Thomas the Tank Engine is chuffing towards you. And he looks like, yeah, unfinished. From the side, it's okay. From the front, it's not so okay. So, yeah. Whereas, you know, even the original coming, chuffing towards you, you knew it was Thomas. So, yeah, I understand people's anger a little bit more now at Thomas Wood, but I think, again, you know, Mattel has made its decision. They've obviously consulted focus groups. They do all their market research. Like, yes, those things can be faulty, but toy companies don't do things like decide to change the entire branding of their line unless they're, you know, more than 50% sure it's going to pull off. And so, as much as we want to scream and yell, and I think that's important, we need to recognize Thomas Wood is probably here to stay, and we should, you know, start to love it for its own charm. Be critical of it where appropriate, but we need to stop hating it for just being Thomas Wood, because it's not going away, and, you know, that's that. I will point out quickly, I am looking obviously for plenty more Thomas Wood stuff that I want to review and I want to check out, but I had a look at Bertie and God, he looks awful. The way they've integrated the passengers, which I know is trying to rip off the Brio, really doesn't work in Thomas and Friends. I understand what they were going for, but yeah, Bertie looks real whack with a hole in the middle. So I think that's something which is going to be really interesting to look at, but not in this video. So, if you've got some thoughts on this Thomas evolution, make sure you let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. I know a lot of people were quite angry, as I expected, in my previous Diesel 10 video. So maybe try and keep it specific to what you think about Thomas. And again, think about which one as a toy would you prefer to have, this one or this one? I think that's a really bit of an interesting question. Let me know about the pricing too, because I heard that apparently the pricing hasn't really changed in the States. It has gotten slightly cheaper here. I don't think it's got as cheap as the stuff they've changed, if that makes sense. Like, I think this is still probably a little bit too expensive. I've always thought Wooden Railway is too expensive, to be honest. But I think it's a little bit too expensive considering what you get. Like, $2 between these doesn't seem like the difference. But again, maybe it is, I don't know. If someone knows more, please tell me. Otherwise, that's what we've got time for. Hope you enjoyed this video. Even if it made you cry, plenty more to come. Thanks for watching. This is XtremeTrainz.